2 months ago, I don't think I would have believed you if you would have told me that this would be a headline. If you were to tell me that the Florida Mutineers, right, the back-to-back champions, the team that since adding Awakening to the lineup had yet to lose after 2 events, the team that took down FaZe 235-70 and a domination, while in the midst of that also 3-0ing them for one of their final victories, to tell me that the Mutineers would be in this conversation right now as a possible non-major threat to win champs, I would have told you were crazy, right? I mean, I think that's fair. I think that is absolutely fair to have that reaction to the conversation that we're currently having. And I want to kind of evaluate this because I think that this conversation is a legitimate one. I think that you can make a case for both sides in terms of, are the Florida Mutineers an actual serious threat to win champs? We're not talking about a serious threat at champs. We know they're going to be that, right? It would be crazy to think that a team can't be a threat, but a threat to win is different. Now, to kind of go over their timeline a little bit, right? Since the back-to-back victories at the Minnesota home series and at the Paris home series, since then, right, they don't play in New York, which is, I think actually did kind of hurt them a little bit, kind of having somewhat of a break. I don't think when you're in the middle of a run like that is something as ideal. They come into London, they finish top 4. They instantly, off of their first series, look like a different team, right? They win a series over Optic Gaming, but it is Optic Gaming's first official series with Draza and Hollow, and it goes to a Game 5 Round 11. Obviously, they win it, come into the next series versus the London Royal Ravens, and they get reverse swept. Mind you, that they also, the reverse sweep starts on Domination St. Petro, which for those that have really kind of done their homework on the Florida Mutineers and even the Ravens as well, Ravens by no means a comfortable team when we talk about a mode like Domination. St. Petro Dom has been Florida's all season long. It doesn't matter who's been on the lineup, by the way, for this team. St. Petro has been their map, and that for me was a very worrying loss that obviously set up what would later be a reverse sweep for the Ravens, which then allows for Florida to lose their very first ever series with Awakening in the lineup. They win the rematch versus Optic in the very next series, and then they come in versus the Dallas Empire. The rematch is inbound, and they get 3-0'd dominantly. Like I said, no map was close. No map was close. This was a series that everybody thought was going to be a fantastic one, right? We get to see the rematch of both of these teams. They've had very close kind of matchups already with this Awakening lineup. They come into this one versus the Empire, and they get dominated. So they finish top 4, right? Not horrible, not bad, but for a team that's won back-to-back, it's interesting, right? It's interesting because you have a few interesting series. You have one that goes the distance that you win. You get reverse swept by the Ravens, which is kind of odd. And now you come into Toronto, the final event of the year, and you finish top 6. Let's get into the plays. They finish top 6. Now, granted, you have to keep in mind that this top 6 finish probably isn't as accurate as many would like to imagine it probably is, because they were most likely in the most difficult pool of the year, right? They come into a group with the Empire, FaZe, and the Rocker. I get it, it's the Rocker, but nonetheless, they kind of come into their very first matchup, get reverse swept by the Empire. They then go on to beat the Rocker 3-1, which is somewhat kind of known, that's not anything odd. And then in the rematch versus the Empire, they get 3-0'd. So, the Florida Mutineers regressed, right? I think that is clear to say that they are not currently the same team that they were when they were winning back-to-back championships. The top 4, the top 6 finish, obviously versus some top caliber teams. You talk about the top 4 finish in particular, by no means one that they probably will remember fondly. But I feel like in some ways, when we talk about this regress period, it is understandable in some ways, right? Considering that keeping up an undefeated streak, a streak that included beating the Huntsman once, beating the Empire twice, beating FaZe twice, that level of pace would be incredibly difficult to keep up with long term. Now, in terms of Mutineers coming into champs, they're kind of hard to judge, right? They're hard to judge because I think that we needed one more event to really come to a real conclusion. Because we can talk about Toronto all we want, but again, they face off against the Empire twice. They're in probably the most difficult group of the year. It's hard to estimate, right? We can probably look at London and realize that, hey, that's probably one where they were coming into, they were feeling confident, we have a little bit of a break. That one I get. That's a mark against them. The one in Toronto, though, is hard to judge, and I feel like we would need one more event to really kind of come to a fine-tuned conclusion of whether or not this team is still a serious contender to win events, let alone champs. But we still can look at the numbers, right? We've got 2 dominant event wins. We have 2 events since those kind of dominant victories, and we can kind of compare the two. So like I said, comparing the numbers between their back-to-back runs and the way they closed out the season. In Hardpoint, they go from 11-3 to 5-7. And Search and Destroy, they go from 7-4 to 5-5. And Domination, they go from 6-2 to 3-4. The biggest drop-off comes from their biggest strong suit, respawns. A 77% win rate in respawns when they were winning back-to-back, to since then a 42% win rate in respawns. And I think a few factors could have caused this decline as well. I don't think it's just a matter of strictly complacency. I think it's fair to say the team's probably on a very, I'd say they're definitely on a high note after these W's, but I think other teams also could have been in a great position to figure them out since they've started to win. This obviously gives a great opportunity for teams to start to learn, hey, what were the Mutineers doing, right? They have a little bit of a break from New York. They kind of come back to this new meta, if you will. Teams have the ability to kind of figure them out. I think the meta as well has definitely kind of caused some changes when we talk about the 3 AR, now back to 2 ARs. Those kind of things I think have hurt the Mutineers overall. The core of this team, though, has correctly been called inconsistent at times. And this is where the interesting conversation really starts to come about. Was that Mutineers team just kind of a great run? Was it just kind of a short period in time? Or is it something that can be done again, right? Was that just a bust? Was that just a moment in time? Or is this an actual thing that they can come back to? Now, while I do feel there has been a drop-off with Florida, I don't think it's as severe enough to consider them a serious threat for champs. I don't think it's a serious enough thing to talk on and say, no, there's not a chance, right? Despite a top 4 and a top 6 finish, the top 4 is still solid. Top 6, you lose to the Empire twice, which is still probably a top 2 team in the game and definitely one of the front runners coming into champs time. So because of those losses and a few shaky others, I don't hold them to the same standards that I did, right? I don't hold them to the same level that I once did. But I also realized that the losses that they suffered weren't as bad as the results may indicate. And like I said, when you're on a run like that, it is so hard to constantly keep up with, considering the talent that you're facing off against on a daily basis. The definition of a serious contender means that they've got a real shot, right? The team's in a great state. They have what it takes to actually win an event of this magnitude. But this current level of play, it's not going to get it done, right? This current level of play that we've seen from the Mutineers, it is not going to get it done as of right now. I am very interested to see what happens with Florida next. And I'm interested to see if they will continue to decline or if a few of these recent losses have only been because of outside factors. But there is no doubt that when the Mutineers are at their best, nobody in the world is better than them. And that's what teams have to be aware of. And that scary factor, right? That one state that they have been in previously is enough for me to call them a serious contender. Because when they went on that 2-event stretch, that was the best team, rather the best a team has looked all year long. Now, I don't think we see them tap back into that mode, but because of that once previous state, because of the way they have looked at times throughout the season, I am still favoring their chances of making it far. I still look at the Mutineers as a serious threat to win champs.